Welcome to the Health Design Leadership Podcast with author, speaker, and leadership coach Carol Phillips. We're here to help you sharpen your leadership skills and discover the best ways to build great teams. So sit back and enjoy this episode of the Health Design Leadership Podcast with your host, Coach Carol.
Hello, leaders. Coach Carol here. I'm super excited to welcome you here today because, believe it or not, we're already wrapping up our first year of the Health Design Leadership Podcast and looking forward to all the great leadership topics we'll be discussing in year 2. In this episode, we're taking a look back on all the fabulous guests who have generously shared their valuable leadership advice and words of wisdom that we can all learn from. I'm truly grateful for the time our guests spend with us and help us take our leadership skills from good to great. Let's kick off the podcast today by revisiting some great advice we learned from our first ever guest, Tom Raffio, President and CEO of Northeast Delta Dental. I asked Tom to talk to us about embracing the values and behaviors that resonate most with employees to create a great company culture. Here's what he shared.
Well, one of the things I've learned, particularly in this day and age where there's staffing shortages you read about just about in every industry, is that people want to work for a company where they have a purpose. So we pay our salaries probably at the 50th percentile level, yet we have very few openings. And one of the things I've learned over the years is, well, certainly people want to be paid fairly. The new modality is that they want to have a job where they feel they're shaping the direction of the company, that they have access to leadership, and that there is a purpose to what they're doing. So if you look at the core values at Northeast Delta Dental, one is communication. All 225 of us get together frequently and they all have access to me. The second core value is teamwork. Everything we do is in teams, cross-functional teams. Third is taking pride in quality. When you call our 800 number, you get a human being within 15 seconds that's an expert. So we still do the human touch and still give quality responses to our customers and to our dentists and try to pay claims 100% accurately. And finally, integrity. We're known for the integrity and being in the community and giving back. And so we literally have very few openings in the company, even in this day and age of low unemployment and people having a lot of openings. And again, I've learned it's really the culture that creates people wanting to work for you. And we have had many examples where people apply for positions that don't even exist, but they just kind of want to get their name out there. So that's kind of what I find exciting in a way, because you don't have to run a country club and pay exorbitant salaries, but what you do have to do is provide purpose for your employee colleagues.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we have Amy LaBelle, founder and winemaker of LaBelle Winery in Amherst and Derry, New Hampshire. I asked her what some of her early memories are of learning how to best lead a team, including what worked well for her and what she found challenging.
I had this huge dream in my heart, right? And I knew where I was going with the ship. You know, the ship was moving to the lighthouse on the other shore. And I knew how I wanted to get there. And I knew what I wanted the quality of that journey to look like. And the mistake that I made early on, and this is something that I feel new entrepreneurs can learn from, is that everybody that I hired would understand the dream, immediately subscribe to it, and it would be as important to them as it is to me. And guess what? It isn't. It isn't. Because it's my dream. And you know, you can be as inspiring as you want as a leader, and you can be as kind and create the best culture and be good to your team. But at the end of the day, for some of them, they're gonna internalize it and they're gonna be right there with you. But for many of them, you know, and I have 250 employees, so you know, I think it's fair to say that for at least half of my team, they're there to get a paycheck. And so it's not true that every single person on your team has to believe in the dream and, live, sleep, and breathe it like you do. That's not going to be the case. And I didn't realize that in the beginning. I kind of went into this with this big, happy-hearted, excited, like a, puppy, like, super thrilled to be chasing the goal. And I would get really frustrated in the beginning thinking, why don't these people get it? Why don't they want to work, hard like me? And they don't. And I've really come to understand over the years that you just have to hire the best possible people, treat them great, but understand that you're the carrier of the dream. Like you have it in your soul and your heart and your work ethic, not them. So you just have to lead from that perspective.
I love that.
If I knew that early on, it would have saved me a lot of heartache, honestly, because I spent a good 2 to 3 years kind of saying, why don't these people love it like I do, and it's not quite the same for everybody.
I can see the challenge in that because you feel like there's a disconnect there because you're waiting for them to feel the same way as you. But I love that because then you realize that they're looking at their position from a different lens, so they can still be an awesome employee, but they're looking at the business differently because it wasn't their dream and it's not their business.
100%. Exactly.
I love that. And it's funny because I was going to ask you next, if you could start over, what's one thing that you would do differently? So I can see where you changing your perspective made you a better leader for them. So if there's something else that you could do differently during this long learning curve that you had of, slowly getting to your dream, what's one thing regarding also leadership that you might do differently?
Oh, yeah, I know. There are 2 things I would have done quicker. One would have been to hire HR as soon as humanly possible, because managing a team is difficult under the best of circumstances, but you really, as the visionary or the leader of the organization, I feel need that buffer, that person to have the meetings with staff who is, having trouble, or have a meeting to hear about, problems that need to be worked out in the workplace, or disgruntled staff that's mad at each other. All of those little things, and they're not little to the people that are in them, so don't get me wrong, but all of those things really detract from a founder or a leader's ability to move the organization forward. And so HR can kind of work as a buffer on some of that stuff, and it keeps you being, as the leader of the organization, keeps you being the good guy or the person who's just in charge of pushing the company forward and leading vision and making sure standards are being met, and making sure all the good things are happening. And you can have HR kind of do the harder interpersonal stuff that maybe entrepreneurs aren't best suited for.
Yes, that's so true. I love that you talk about that as a buffer. When I work with business leaders and I'm talking to them about having difficult conversations with employees, one of the tips I give them is to avoid the me versus you and kind of have a third thing in the room, which is basically the company and the company's mission and what we both need to do together to focus on that mission. And it takes the me versus you out of the equation.
Yeah, that's really good advice for sure. Because I say I work for the lady, the LaBelle lady.
That beautiful logo lady.
Yeah, that's my logo. I work for her.
That's awesome. Thank you, Amy. We also spoke with S. Renee Smith, who's a nationally recognized executive development expert and Leaders Career Accelerator. Here's one of the great leadership topics we discussed. You've been working with business leaders for many years now, and you talk about executive presence. Please tell us what that is and how it helps business leaders.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I'm going to start with the model that I developed several years ago when I was asked to speak and develop a program for SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, for their senior leadership program. And I created a 3-day process called Powerful Leaders transform your personal brand and executive presence. And when I began to think about executive presence and what it is and how people show up in it and what it looked like, I began to think about people I know or have met along, during my life, such as Oprah Winfrey and General Welch and Iman. And I noticed how people showed up in different ways. And I recognized that it's really an output, right? So executive presence in and of itself is simply how someone shows up. Mm-hmm. But what are the inputs that are needed for a person to exhibit executive presence is really where I'd like to take the conversation if possible. Mm-hmm. And it really starts with the mindset, right? How do I see myself? How do I see others? And how do I see the world around me? Which really moves into attitude, right? And attitude is simply your likes and dislikes. What do I like about this person? What do I dislike? And how do those likes and dislikes shape how I show up and how I engage with other people? Because that's going to determine the persona. That's going to determine the energy in which I operate in. And then you also have your personality, your self-esteem, the values, your beliefs, your appearance. All of that, right, is what leads into self-actualization, which is self-awareness. It's situational awareness. And from there, you become more courageous, more confident, and you're able to exhibit your competence in a confident and courageous way that looks like executive presence.
Right. And then once you reach that awareness, it's so much easier to be kinder to other people, especially everyone on your team, and be more focused on how you can serve them and make their lives easier.
Absolutely. Because, and that leads to executive presence. And let's be clear and dive a little bit deeper into that, because you make a good point in terms of how you treat people, right? So that situational awareness leads into that, helps you lean into that, but also it leans into listening, how you listen, not just what you're hearing, but how you're listening and what are you feeling as a result of what you're hearing, because that's what leads into empathy. That's what leads into great leadership, because not only am I hearing what you're saying, I'm feeling what you're saying. And as I feel what you're saying, I'm able to put into context what you're going through and therefore better able to serve you.
Thank you, S. Renee. Next, we spoke to Diane Fitzpatrick, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Boys and Girls Club of Manchester, New Hampshire. I asked her how she creates a positive work culture.
I love thinking about work culture. When I came into this role, 9 years ago, it was very male dominant, and not that that's a bad thing, not, it's just how it was, right? Mm-hmm. And it seemed like it was very divided, and no fault to anybody. That's just how the organization was running. And through my previous experiences in higher education, I worked for the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits for a period of time, worked for my brother's company for a period of time. What I've learned from my role models that I've been so lucky to have in my life is they always demonstrated this shared leadership style. And I really believe that when you, as a leader or manager, demonstrate to the people that you're working with that we're in this together, and creating this culture that it's a shared model and building people up that they feel like they're being valued, they're being heard, that they have a place. I feel like you're going to get a stronger employee, and not even an employee, a partner in your organization. And, it's been a hard road, because not everybody understands the importance. Like, we think of leadership that, oh, this is a top dog, we have to do whatever this person says. And that's not what shared leadership is. It's like getting behind the closed doors in the conference room and having great debates of what we think this organization should be and where we need to move, and creating a culture where people's voices do matter. It's a real work, because you do have to have that active listening. You have to really meet people where they're at and help, I don't want to say pull them along, guide them along, so that they feel like they are successful. No one wants to work in an environment where they work hard, they work putting in 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and not feeling successful. People need to feel successful and valued and having a sense of purpose. So our work culture is really important. And over the last 9 years, it's continuing to evolve. Our organization's grown very fast, I think. And we finally have an HR director that cultivates that person. She's that coach for so many people here, that sounding board. And we didn't have that before, but I can't stress enough the importance for organizations to have a person on their team that can be that sounding board and help do leadership training and be there for your employees.
Thank you, Diane. Next, we interviewed Leslie Sturgeon, visionary and founder of Women Inspiring Women. I asked Leslie how her leadership style contributes to positive experiences and what are some of her favorite leadership skills that she's learned along the way.
I think my authenticity has been really helpful. Years ago, I was struggling with overwhelm, and I felt like I wasn't doing a good job at anything. I was just really being harsh on myself. And I said to one of my friends and members of Women Inspiring Women, I just feel like I'm drowning. And I'm trying not to let people see that. And she said, you have a beautiful opportunity to let people see behind the curtain. And as a woman and as a perfectionist, I thought, I could never do that. They're going to think less of me. They're going to, they're going to be judgmental. I don't want to let people see behind the curtain. And she said, well, I think there's power in doing that because you have this beautiful group of women who are on this journey with you. And we all have overwhelm from time to time. So just own it. Make your mess your message, as Robin Roberts says. So I did. And it was extremely difficult. And I thought, this is either going to be great for me and I'm going to bust wide open, or I am going to regret that I ever did this. And it was one of the best things I ever did for myself. And for the women in my group too, because I just started owning what were my challenges and obstacles and asking for feedback. And once you open that door, it just opens these floodgates of other people coming forward. And it really helped me get out of this overwhelm. So it was just this most beautiful thing, is just letting people see behind the curtains, letting them see what I perceived were my shortcomings, the challenges that I was going through. And it reminded me that this sense of community is everything, surrounding yourself with the right people. And it's amazing when you get people together that are on a similar journey, all the goodness that can come from that, the conversations that you have. There's that saying that you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with. And yes, that is absolutely true. So when you're around people that are understanding, but they're also on the same journey of personal growth, it changes everything. So I think authenticity and just owning all of it. But also, I try to bring a sense of playfulness because that's who I am 24/7. I think a lot of people get, it's a professional environment. We need to be sort of buttoned up or whatever. And I'm the opposite of that. I like to play and have fun. I like to laugh. And that has really served me well because, again, if you're passionate about something, it should just ooze out of every pore. And I think people get that sense when they're around me that I'm just doing what I love and I'm feeding off of their energy and that they matter.
Yeah. We get the real you, which is awesome. And Those are such great messages for business leaders. The part about being vulnerable. I'm so glad we're talking more and more about mental health and letting people feel comfortable with saying, hey, I'm not doing well today, or I need help, or everything stinks right now. Instead of when people say, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And you're not always doing good. I find that when I'm speaking and I talk about a vulnerability, that's when it just really resonates with people, because it's almost like like you were saying, buttoned up. We live in a society where we're kind of taught, we need to have a positive attitude and see the glass as half full, but sometimes that's taken to an extreme and then people suffer in silence.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think that the more we speak out about it and we demonstrate that, it gives other people permission to do that, because things are not always rosy. Especially as we're growing and evolving as leaders and business owners and women, we just need to put it all out there. And I think for you, Carol, and for me, and a lot of the other women that we've met, their life and their work is so commingled. It's who we are. We live and breathe it 24/7. It's what we're passionate about, and we don't need to have a different persona for work. We just don't need to. So I think when people start realizing that things are just that much better. So yeah, authenticity, you and I both lead, I think, from the heart.
Thank you, Leslie. We also interviewed Peter Richard, General Manager at XMA Corporation. I asked Peter to share some communication strategies he uses as a leader to help his team work best together.
I always start with honesty, and I don't mean that in necessarily the traditional sense. I mean it from just be real. There are things that we will all encounter in life and in work that we may not know the answer to. We may have never experienced it. And as a leader, oftentimes people are looking to you thinking that you may have experienced it, or you at least have the answer to it. And oftentimes we don't. We're learning just as much as everyone else around us is. And starting from that lens and just being transparent about it is important. I think that it gains buy-in. It also gains confidence and trust, that you're not making it up. You're not kind of trying to navigate it without really knowing. You're just being honest that I might not know the answer, but we'll figure it out together. So I think leading with honesty, transparency is critically important. There are things I can't share or are just not public knowledge. And I think being honest about what you can talk about, what you can't talk about, and leading from that lens is important too. Just being transparent, and that builds trust. And then I think humility, making sure people know you're real. You can be fun, be yourself. Don't follow what you think you have to do. Be yourself, and that will help guide you along the way.
That's terrific. I love those. And when you were talking about being transparent and honest, that's what employees want. They want to know they can trust you and that you're being as honest as possible. I know sometimes when I'm working with business leaders, they feel like they have to know everything. They have to, if there's certain things that they can't reveal to employees, they come across as though they're hiding something. And employees would much rather hear, there are certain things I can tell you right now, there's certain things I can't tell you right now. And they respect that. They know that those situations are going to happen.
Agreed. And that's always been my experience. And just laying it out from the beginning is really, that will pay dividends.
Yes. Our brains are looking for, can we trust this person? Are they going to be honest with me? Are they going to be transparent? Not, are they perfect? Do they know everything? Right? We're going to be more comfortable when people are real with us. And then we're going to be more likely to be honest with our superiors and comfortable in that they're comfortable with that setting.
Agreed. One of the things that I think has helped guide me along the way, and this is a testament to XMA's president, is he always inspired me to remember that the decisions that we make impact the people who work for us. They impact the food that goes on the table. They impact the shoes that you put on their children's feet. And that when you think of it that way, it really changes your, I guess, your outlook, or your decision making. Yes, there are business decisions that I have to make, that we have to make, but remembering that these decisions have a real impact on real people is incredibly important. And I've always led with that, after he and I have, over the years have just developed that rapport with each other and talking about things like that. That's how I lead. And I thank him for that.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we interviewed Terry Britt. Former Miss USA, Terry Britt is a spiritual coach, intuitive healer, TEDx speaker, award-winning author, and founder of the Women Leaders of Love global community. Terry uses the phrase, own your worth, and I asked her to share with us more about that wonderful phrase. You use that great phrase, own your worth. And when I'm working with business leaders, I ask them to prioritize their own self-care and confidence to be better role models for their teams. Terry, can you please talk to us about this important concept that everyone can benefit from?
Yes, owning your worth. So what I have seen over the years, and because I work with energy as well, and I don't know how many of your listeners are into energy and quantum physics, but when we're trying to prove our worth, what we're actually doing is sending a message that who I am is not enough. Now think about that. If you are trying to be make the most money because that's going to prove your worth, if you are trying to be the best parent because you feel like that's going to prove your worth, what you're in essence saying is just being me is not enough. And what that does energetically is sends out a message of guilt and shame. And when we look at the map of consciousness, guilt and shame are the two lowest energies there are. Shame is the lowest out of 1,000 at 20, guilt is at 30. So when you are coming from this space of performing, trying to be good, holding back your voice, not being who you are, suppressing your light, all of those things, because that in essence is trying to be good or trying to be the best as well. I'm going to be the best girl. I'm going to be the best guy, right? I mean, it's like you are living by these rules. When you live by those, you come from these lower vibrations. And because energy always attracts like energy, life is going to continue to throw lemons at you. And you're going to feel like you're on a hamster wheel of stress and struggle. And so what I discovered is that as I said no more to performing and said yes to loving myself, I crossed this divide of lack and took a stand for loving myself. And what I did is what I was shown through meditation. One day, just a little Terry showed up and I'd never seen her before. It was like she just showed up and I was crying and crying. And I actually heard Get Up and Write This. This is the beginning of your book, which was my first book, Message Sent. But I was, as I would talk to her, all of a sudden, I started feeling as if I were really seen, as if I were really heard, as if I were really valued. As I treated myself by making this connection as if I mattered, I felt so much more love on the inside, so much more worthiness. And because I was now feeling worthy, I started opening up to receive miracles. And I could tell, we could be here all day, me sharing miracles with you of things that have shown up. And like when I first started doing this, I was on my first book tour for Message Sent, and it was during the beginning of the Iraq War where everything was getting canceled. All my news, interviews were being canceled to cover to cover the war. And so I sat there and said, okay, part of me was the ego said, I got to get back on the hamster wheel. I got to get back on the hamster wheel. And my soul said, no, I just want to be a vegetable for a couple of days. And I had a manager back then. She's saying, you need to go see Thoroughly Modern Millie. It's a great metaphor for your work. Or she said that, or hairspray. And I just threw it up in the air and I said, you know what? I'm going to be a vegetable. This is what my heart is telling me. Tomorrow I'm going to get up and go to the New York Health and Racket Club. And then we'll figure it out from there. So I did that, and I did it. And here's the key: without guilt or shame, because oftentimes when we're doing self-care, when we think we're owning our worth, we'll be in our head going, well, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And that takes us back down to that guilt or shame level. Okay.
Yes.
So it's sabotaging us. But when
Right.
we can really be in acceptance of this is where I am right in this moment, we're owning our worth. And so what happened for me that day is I did all that. I just stayed with myself and, cuddled up and made myself really nurtured. The next day, I went to the New York Health and Racquet Club, meet a woman before a Pilates class I was going to take, come back out afterwards, start talking to her, and she just happens to say, "So, are you going to see any plays while you're in New York?" And I said, "I don't know. My manager wants me to see Hairspray or Thoroughly Modern Millie." And she goes, "Oh, well, I work in management at the Marriott Marquis, and Thoroughly Modern Millie is playing in our theater. How about I take you as my guest?"
Wow.
Okay. So that moment, Carol, blew my mind.
That's
It blew my
unbelievable.
mind because, you think about just all of New York, the one day, the one class, the one gym, the one woman, I mean, it was miraculous. And so what I took from that moment was that it kind of started cementing what I had been feeling as Miss USA when that seed was planted. It started really cementing that wow, when I love and nurture myself, when I own my worth without shame or guilt, when I stop the performance, I open up to miracles and abundance. And I call this your worthiness quotient. So your worthiness quotient is how open are you to receiving the love, nurturing, and support that you deserve.
Thank you, Terry. Next, we interviewed John Clayton, who spent 27 years as a reporter and columnist with the New Hampshire Union Leader. I asked him about the importance of community collaboration. John, you've donated countless hours as a community volunteer over the years. Please share with us some of your experiences and how business leaders can use active volunteerism to improve their leadership skills.
I would say the most important one, or the one that resonates most with people from Manchester, is the fact that my grandfather was raised in what we know today as the Webster House. When my great-grandparents came here in 1883, my great-grandfather died shortly thereafter. So my great-grandmother was left with my grandfather, 5 years old at the time. And because things were different then, there was no dole, there was no welfare program. My great-grandmother had to continue working. So my grandfather was one of the first 23 residents of the Webster House when it opened as the Manchester Children's Home. And over time, my father was always good about sharing his family history. And that was a big part of it. The fact that my grandfather was raised at the Webster House. So as my professional career went on, people asked me to write about events. The Webster House is having its 125th anniversary. Would you be the master of ceremonies? And most people at the time didn't know about my family's history with that nonprofit organization. So because I'm always looking for column material, I wrote a column on the Monday. The event was on Tuesday. I wrote a column on the Monday and made it known that my ties to the Webster House went far beyond just altruistic means. It's everything my family has been able to achieve. And that includes my 5 siblings and me, my daughter and my 2 grandchildren, is attributable in part to what the Webster House provided to this community. So when they asked me to serve on the board, how do you say no to something that is tied to your family's legacy? So I served 5 years as chairman of the board of the Webster House. And about 2 months ago, I was very honored to be the guest of honor at their 140th anniversary gathering. So to me, that's an example of how you can find a niche in which you can become engaged and, in my case, run with it.
That is amazing. And right, how can that not be such a huge connection? And to educate the young people on the importance of places like the Webster House.
And I'm not a political person. I certainly have my opinions, but I'm not a political animal. Yet when people approach me to serve on the Manchester Charter Commission, it was an elected position, nine members. I reluctantly agreed to sign up. I'm not here we are talking about engagement. I'm not a great collaborator. As a journalist, I was really a lone wolf. I would take my own pictures and find my own stuff and work alone. But the collaborative nature of something like being elected to the City Charter Commission is something that I accepted as, my community's calling on me. And subsequently, I served on the school charter commission as well. So those are the two elected positions I've held in my career: collaborative, community focused. It will never happen again.
And the more we learn, isn't it amazing? In such a small world.
Oh, it is. And, again, being natives, we know people instinctively. And when I was asked to take on a development role at the Milliard Museum, I reluctantly said, all right, but I was wary about it. And they said, it's not what you know in this case, it's who you know. You know everybody. And that can only help open doors because of my individual connections to so many people in the community.
Thank you, John. And last but not least, we interviewed Maureen Beauregard, President and CEO of Easter Seals, New Hampshire and Vermont. I asked Maureen about the importance of business leaders taking great care of their team members and trusting them to take great care of their clients and customers. For leaders who struggle with connecting the dots between taking great care of the team and trusting that they'll pass that on to people or clients or customers that they serve, what would you tell them?
I've had this philosophy. I don't know when I created it or when I connected the dots on it, but I feel like we're here for two reasons: to love and be loved and to serve others. And for the majority of people, that is what to love and be loved, that, sitting with others is really, really the lifeblood of community, of an organization, of how we are in this world, I feel. And, value, we feel valued when we can sit at the table, when we are part of something else. And that is critical to leadership. And if I come into an organization and I don't see you and I don't value you and I don't think you should be at the same table as me, I wonder how they are successful. You can have people who run businesses, who make money, and staff are just miserable. And they stay because perhaps they have no other options for their skill set or whatever. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in having people who are I want you to be happy to come to work and happy to go home. If you're happy at work, the folks we serve are going to be really happy. They're going to get the best care and the best outcomes. And whether you're doing widgets or you are, working with people like we do, I feel like people are more than willing and want to help with that mission success when that environment exists.
Thank you, Maureen. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed revisiting clips from our interviews with all these great business leaders. I trust you found some golden nuggets you can use in your leadership journey. Be on the lookout for our next episode so we can all continue to maximize our leadership skills. Thanks for listening, and make today a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Health Design Leadership Podcast with Carol Phillips. Be sure to click on the subscribe button so you won't miss any new episodes. To listen to the entire conversation with our guest, join our online leadership dream team at AskCoachCarol.com. If you're looking for an engaging speaker for your next event or an effective trainer to strengthen your leadership team, contact Coach Carol today. Thanks again for listening, and make it a great day.